Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you.
Discover a new path to wellness at Arizona Metabolic Health. Dr. Brian Lenzkes offers advanced medicine and personalized care, treating the root causes of your health concerns, not just the symptoms. Whether you're seeking direct primary care, effective diabetes management, or medical weight loss, with a holistic approach, our team is here to guide you every step of the way. Visit ArizonaMetabolicHealth.com today to learn more about our innovative health solutions.
Oh my goodness, everyone, it's May. That means summer's coming, swimsuits and fancy clothes and all that kind of stuff. So gosh darn it, we gotta fix all the problems we did during the holidays and everything. So hopefully we're all staying on track. And I just want to thank Health Code for sponsoring this episode. They're helping us get into better shape and eat good nutrition and have some sweet stuff too along the way. So they have tons of recipes at their website, GetHealth, GetHLTH.com. And also we have a promo code MetHealth for metabolic health, METHEALTH. And so please help those guys, buy their products, use it. If you have parents who are getting older like mine, this is the best thing you can possibly do for them. Give them good nutrition and give ourselves good nutrition to prevent all these other things that are coming our way as we get older. So thank you, Health Code. And also try their berberine if you haven't tried it yet. It's a great berberine and it has anti-inflammatory in there. So, that's really good too for metabolic health. So thank you for listening and enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have a guest I'm really excited about. Someone like we're on opposing sides of medicine, maybe, right? Functional medicine on one side, which I've gravitated more towards than my traditional internal medicine training, allopathic. And so Anu Simh, awesome to have you.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure.
I'm really looking forward to it. It's so great to have you.
Yeah.
9 Arms of Wellness. First of all, let's talk about 9 Arms of Wellness. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started working with clients, I realized that like most of us in this whole science world, we think it's nutrition is like the biggest needle mover. But that was not clicking for a lot of clients. They came in very stressed. Their sleep was compromised. They were, not mindful in their daily habits and things like that. So I kind of realized just working with clients that this is more than just food. It has habits, exercise, sleep, all of this matters. So that's how I came up with the 9 Arms. Yeah.
That's so important because I think that's one of the things that, I'm a co-host on the Low Carb MD, but if I start talking about faith or sleep or stress, I go, we don't want to talk about that. We just want to talk about the nutrition side.
Yeah.
And when you start realizing, look, if from my perspective, we're looking at insulin resistance, high sugars, high, eating the processed foods. And if we can cut that out, we do better. But if you're stressed, intense, and hate the world, you're not going to have the benefits that you will when you find your peace.
Yeah, and the thing is, it is science-backed too. I mean, neuroscience and everything supports what was once just ancient wisdom, right? About, just let the matter of sleep, for example, it's finally getting its due. We're talking about sleep and how important it is. But even a few years ago, we weren't talking about sleep. It was just something, we were just so busy working so hard, all hours of the night, and really not respecting our circadian rhythm. But that's also shifted. So I feel like, we're finally getting to that point where we respect that it is not just one thing, but there are so many components and it's multifactorial. And being optimally well requires us to pay attention to all of these things.
Yeah, and nutrition happens to be one of those. And looking at the gut microbiome, I would love to pick your brain on this for a while
Yeah.
because the gut microbiome, and I can ask you because I'll ask leading questions for a second here. How about the effects of stress and not sleeping on the gut microbiome?
Oh, big time. I mean, when you think about stress, your nervous system, you're in fight or flight, and it doesn't matter if you have the best low carb meal or a high protein meal or a plant-centric meal, it doesn't matter. But if you have stress, and especially chronic stress, it does affect the microbiome. 90% of your happy hormone serotonin is made in your gut. The gut and the brain are constantly talking to each other, more the gut sending messages to the brain. And when you start, when there's chronic stress, there's inflammation, and studies are showing us that some of these very incredible serotonin producing bacteria could be lost. So when there's imbalance in the gut and there's dysbiosis, which is another word for imbalance, we end up feeling more anxious, low depression, things like that. And we never think about it. We always think about it as a more of a mental thing, but it is really everything is starting in the gut.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff like irritable bowel syndrome. Back in the
Hmm.
day, I remember them saying, "Oh, they're just nutty. They're stressed. There's nothing there." They scope them, and everything looks good.
Yeah,
And the more you're around, the more you realize anyone with irritable bowel syndrome, it gets worse when they're stressed, tense, not
yeah,
sleeping. Going through a hard time, a divorce. And so there's actually new data showing the more stress you get, the more you have the leaky gut, and all these lipopolysaccharides and inflammatory
yeah,
markers leak across there and cause
yeah,
irritation to the nerves, which
yeah,
causes real pain.
yeah, definitely. And IBS, SIBO, all of them have something to do with that you know, intestinal permeability or leaky gut, as we call it. And the endotoxemia increases all of these polysaccharides could enter the bloodstream, causing more of that inflammatory response. And no matter what you eat or anything, if you have that kind of inflammatory response to food or lifestyle or anything like that, it's just going to cause more problems. And so the important thing is to nourish your microbiome. I think we are at a place from a research perspective, that the gut microbiome plays a huge role, and taking care of it and nourishing your microbiome, feeding it right, not just by feeding it the fuel that it requires, but also through your lifestyle, matters incredibly. Yeah.
Yeah, exercise, sun exposure, all these things will
Oh,
affect the gut microbiome. And when we look at these chronic illnesses that we're all afraid of, like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's, autism, and you start seeing they all have in common a very narrow gut microbiome,
yeah.
unhealthy gut microbiome.
Yeah, in fact, post-stroke, there's been studies that show that the gut microbiome changes, and so it becomes very important to start nourishing the microbiome right away to prevent that exacerbation of like an inflammatory response in the gut. So I think you're right, all of these mental, that kind of issues, but also gut issues, NCDs, they're all kind of connected. I mean, even just you mentioned insulin resistance, and that is connected to the gut microbiome, GLP-1 hormones. What are you feeding them? The past few years that I've been researching for the book, the one thing that kept coming up in all of the research is feeding them the fuel that they really need, and that's fiber. And that's where I feel like we talk so much about macros. I mean, right now we have so many wars going on. Oh, high protein, low protein, vegan, whatever. But I think in this mix, we forget the importance of micronutrients and nourishing our bodies, because if we are lacking these micronutrients, fiber, and things that we can't make, vitamins and minerals, we're really having some pretty big deficiencies. Think about bone health. I mean, I know some of my male clients will say, "Oh, isn't that just an old lady problem?" No, it can start in your 20s. I have 20-year-olds who already show on DEXA scans that they're losing bone density. And by the time you're 30, you've done all of your development of your bones. So it's really imperative that we have that micronutrient rich food. And in that mix, I will add fiber. I think fiber is key to so many different things that I could talk all day about fiber.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting. I think this is a really important one because where I see a lot of fighting going on. You have the carnivore community, and what's interesting is I have a lot of people that I've talked to that went carnivore because they had so many gut problems. So
Mhm.
they eat meat only, and they get better, and they feel better, and their mental functioning gets better. To have other people on the other side of the spectrum who go more a vegetarian, vegan diet, and they feel a lot better, and their gut gets better.
Yeah.
And so the argument is, oh, you don't need fiber. And so I think long term, if you want to, if we're talking about the gut microbiome diversity, I would think that if you're only eating one thing, then you're going to have much less diversity in your
Mhm.
gut, which is correlated with all these other chronic illnesses.
Absolutely. And I don't know. I mean, I think if you are feeling really unwell, your gut is having all of these problems, it just makes sense to avoid them, eliminate certain triggers to see if your gut is going to do better. And short term, I think it really helps most of us go through an elimination diet. But when you're on long term, restrictive diets, I call them restrictive because that's what they are. Um, the microbiome really takes a beating. I mean, if you don't have polyphenols, flavonoid-rich foods to help them grow and have that diversity. So I think a big part of really describing a healthy microbiome is to really understand that it needs to be a resilient microbiome. And a resilient microbiome is one that can fight your battles, can bounce back. Let's say go to Mexico, eat anything, have Montezuma's revenge, take some antibiotics, come back and be okay. Why is it some of us can and some of us can't, and that could be related to the microbiome and its diversity. So, species richness in the gut, species evenness, all of that is very important for a resilient microbiome. And I don't see how you can do that without giving them um, the fuel that they really need. And I think when people say I'm on this diet or that diet, it's kind of like perturbing because you're just put on this earth, and all this bounty to be eating everything, right? You should be able to eat everything. Why do we have so many intolerances? That becomes the bigger question. Why are we so affected by food? If we have way more food intolerances today than we did in the maybe the 60s or 70s. I mean, are we pointing to certain things? Maybe having foods that our biology does not understand. Is it really food? The ultra processed crap that's kind of, comes into our lives and takes on such a big role. I mean, they are so hyper palatable and so hedonic. It's so impossible to say hi no to processed foods. Maybe that's the only way to do it. I'm divorcing you. I don't want any part of it because it's really hard to just say, let me just take one bite of a cookie because we're just so enamored by it that it has the right mix of fat and, you know, um,
Salt and sugar, and
salt and sugar and all that. So,
yeah, and then the gut microbiome actually can make you crave more of that. That's what's
yeah.
interesting. But like candida can release toxins that make you want to eat more
Mm.
sugar, so it feeds it because they
Yeah,
want to
feeds
survive
it.
too.
And then it's the pathogenic bacteria that really thrive. And it's the beneficial bacteria don't recognize it as food. So then again, that imbalance in the gut increases.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and the other thing is, I'd love to hear your take on postmenopausal women and their changes that they're going to have in their gut microbiome.
oh, big time. In fact, I was reading a study where they said that postmenopausal women's bacteria starts resembling that of a man. It changes to that extent. And of course, one of the big things we see in postmenopausal women is that belly fat. It could be a cortisol response, but it could be also the strobolome and just a bunch of bacteria in your gut that are really responsible for estrogen detoxifying. But when your estrogen tanks, there are other things that are happening in this detoxification pathways. We have xenoestrogens coming into our world, like from plastics and things like that, that can really affect the microbiome as well. And of course, all of the a slew of chemicals and pesticides that cause problems.
And
So definitely,
detergents and lotions and all the
yeah,
emulsifiers that we have in our food. So,
yeah.
so what do you advise people coming in, middle-aged females, stressed out, going through all the menopausal stuff? What kind of changes do you do right off the start that you think are helpful?
That's a great question, Brian. It really depends on who's asking the question. If a client comes in and I immediately see that they're very anxious and nervous, you can see their anxiety, right? You can
Mhm.
hear it. They're not able to stop talking. They're just going in different directions. They're lost. They feel really exhausted by all of this information out there. They don't know what to make of it. Then I really let the client decide, what would you like to do first? What would you like to focus on first? And at the back of your mind, it's always that dreaded belly fat. It is this how my body is changing. I'm not as sexy as I used to be. All of that is there. But when you really sit and talk to them, it is they just want to feel good in their bodies. They want that health back. They want to be able to go for a walk and not have joint pain. They want to be able to sleep at night without night sweats or, hot flashes and things like that. So it really depends on the client. And I usually say, let's start small. If you're not sleeping well, let's focus on sleep. If you're stressed, let's focus on some breath work. Let's talk about mindfulness, things like that to help you with that stress. If you're having a bunch of problems with allergies with your food, then let's start there. Let's start eliminating some of these
Mhm.
triggers and see if you're going to feel better. Will that joint pain decrease? Is it gluten related? Is it cross reacting with something else? And then if you're constipated, which is a huge problem with a lot of women, then we start looking into the gut microbiome. We test it. And I have to say, it's not a diagnostic test yet, but we have a good idea of the distal colon and what kind of um, uh, microbes are in the feces. And then from there, we can decide what kind of diversity is in the gut. Do you have the keystone species that are so important? Are they the big players? And if not, then we get a good idea. And this is where I think there's some research about. I know the carnivores out there are not going to like this, but when we talk about animal protein versus plant protein and things like that, the one thing that we know as far as the microbiome, it is very adept at using fiber as its fuel. But when you don't take in the fiber and you're just eating a largely protein-based diet, it they're not going to say no to the protein. They're going to eat the protein, but they may produce some healthy compounds, but they also produce some toxic metabolites like hydrogen sulfide, polyamines, ammonia, and things like that. And those are not good for us, and it could affect us and be detrimental to our health. So I always say, eat for your palate, choose the protein or the diet that you really, really like for your well-being as you see, but also nourish them, and that means a small part of that plate has something for them every day.
See more and more that people who are more on a carnivore diet they're adding in more fermented vegetables at least. They're doing
Yeah.
kimchi and sauerkraut, and they're adding in, some kefir or maybe some Greek yogurt to
Super
that.
easy, super easy to do that. And they can still have a very healthy lifestyle because they're cutting out all the crap. They're not taking in the sugar or the flour and all of those things. And maybe the big ones that really affect them are the beans and lentils and things like that. And they're probably nervous about the phytic acid and things like that. We could go into an entire conversation about that because there's a lot of controversy about that as well. But I would say a good place, and even fermented foods, you have to go slow because it can really just bombard your gut if you don't have the right microbes to digest it.
Yeah, and anytime you change it, that's one of the things I hear. Someone will be carnivore for a long time, and then they'll have vegetables one day. They go, see, I had gas all night, and my stomach
Yeah,
hurt. That some I'm allergic. You're not allergic. You just don't
yeah.
have the gut microbiome to digest that yet. But with time, it can improve.
I see this a lot, Brian, especially with the CGMs now, and people are kind of mono eating to see how CGMs, which is the continuous glucose
Yeah.
monitor, and they say, "Oh, I can't eat this. My blood sugar's spiked, so I'm not going to touch red pepper. I'm not going to touch this." But when do we ever eat like 4 or 5 of pears or 10 apples or something like that? We don't eat like that. We eat a balanced meal with different things. We have enough protein in the meal, and we have enough good fats, and they are going to help you with that, kind of balance that blood sugar spike. And so it's the same thing, right? It's just about balance and having that Goldilocks principle when it comes to nutrition as well.
Yeah, and that's been the argument in the low carb community. And you'll see that too. They'll say net carbs or total carbs, and people are debating it. It's like
Mhm.
really how much fiber's in it to hold that sugar in the gut too. Because if you want to feed your
Yeah,
distal colon, you want to hold it there, right? To
yeah.
instead of absorbing it all through a leaky gut, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's all anecdotal, and of course, science begins with anecdotes, and I do agree with that, but we don't have solid science behind it. So, but what we do is we have very good science behind the microbiome. We have some good science for these polyphenolic compounds, and we know that fiber that's coming from things like chia seeds, nuts, and seeds really can even decrease your LDL by 5 to 6 points. And again, that may just trigger another conversation. Is LDL really a marker for heart disease or something like that? So where do we go?
Yeah, but I think what we can say is all these other things increase loneliness, stress, worries, not sleeping,
Yeah.
all these other factors we have involved. And if your gut's a mess, guess what? You're going to be more stressed. I was reading a study that they did in Germany. They took some college students, and all they did, they came in happy and everything's great, divided them into two groups, and they just injected them with a little lipopolysaccharide.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the ones who got that little tiny pin drop were depressed, anxious, stressed, crying, hated
Yeah.
the world, like within an hour. And you think,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, if your gut's a mess, you're absorbing that your whole
Yeah.
life every day.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, all your instincts, everything you're messaging comes from the gut. I've seen this with people who don't sleep well. There are studies that show that when you don't sleep well, even for one night, it really affects the gut, the microbial diversity. So, because we have a circadian rhythm, and if we're not following our circadian rhythm, it affects the circadian rhythm of the gut microbiome as well. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because my office manager really has been diving into functional medicine a lot, and there was one of our patients who was every time there was a full moon, he would have panic attacks and anxiety and all this stuff.
yeah.
And she said, "Oh, I bet you have a parasite or you have a gut microbiome issues," and he did
Mhm.
have a lot. And so it's
Yeah.
amazing how they do cycle with the circadian rhythms.
Yeah, it's definitely they're connected. I mean, like even just one night of erratic eating at past a certain hour can make you the next day eat more than 500 calories of these hyper palatable foods. So we are so diurnal, respecting our circadian rhythm and having these nervous system regulating kind of habits are so important. So when I heard on your show that you talk about spirituality and about relationships, I feel like all of them are connected. Having good relationships, having love, and joy and peace, all of that is connected.
Helping other people, all those things, you
Okay.
release oxytocin, you lower your
Yeah.
cortisol, you lower your stress hormones. So why do you want to be in that bad environment? If we're on the other side of the colon, we're looking at insulin resistance and high sugars, high insulins, metabolic disease that your body's not working right.
Yeah.
The more stressed you are, the more that's bad. I mean,
Yeah.
the diet is just one factor out of all these. Like
Oh,
you said, the nine arms,
definitely.
we got 8 other arms to look at.
Yeah. And I mean, like insulin resistance and those blood sugar spikes on a CGM, I have definitely seen that when I'm under stress. Oh my gosh, I can eat the best food.
Yeah.
It'll kind of shoot up. Or one night of not sleeping well, the next. I don't know if it's because I'm searching for something I'm definitely not looking for broccoli. Like,
Well, that's in this. You're right. The studies do show that. When I was in
yeah,
residency, I remember looking at my wife and I said, "I'm telling you, one day they're gonna figure this out." But when I'm on call all night in the ICU, first of all, we eat more than we normally do because we eat because we
yeah,
think we're not going to be able to eat again because we're going to be up all night, and then we have a break. And oh, we better eat something. And so the next day, I would watch all the co-residents that I worked with, and all of them were eating everything, junk food,
yeah,
terrible
yeah,
stuff. And now we have more and more studies coming back saying, yes, it makes you really crave more sugar and processed foods when you're sleep
yeah,
deprived.
yeah.
So if we don't work on that, we're always going to be on that, anxious and you want to eat everything the next day.
Definitely, yeah. So that's why they're super connected, I think.
When you think about when you're, and this is what it was a friend of mine that said at one time in a conference, I thought, I never thought about it that way, but no other animal except us humans eats when we're stressed. When we get stressed, we eat because we're calming our nerves and getting that dopamine
Yeah,
hit. And, a
you're
deer
right.
doesn't stop and eat when it's getting chased by a lion. It doesn't stop,
Yeah.
zebras aren't stopping to eat something. They're
I
getting
mean,
out of
they're
there.
well, I
And
mean, rest and digest is when we should be, but
And it's hard,
yeah,
like you're saying, but when we're busy and hectic and your life is crazy, and those are the people I've seen have
yeah,
struggles trying to get their lifestyle changed because you just don't have time to take care of yourself. And a lot of those people are also the caregivers. They're caring for everyone else except themselves, and they feel
yeah.
bad if they take time to relax or just spend time doing what brings them peace.
Yeah. And I think from a microbial perspective, what you eat, but when you eat and how you eat are all important. When you eat is really important. I mean, like ancient wisdom, like traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, really, really that focuses on that, like eat with the sun when high noon, when so you get the digestive power of the sun. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It could be ancient wisdom, but I see such a connection to microbiome health. It's incredible how did they know that? I remember my grandmother, when she would always say, "Eat your cabbage with mustard seeds." And today we know that it's the myrosinase and mustard seeds that help us digest the cabbage, the sulfur compounds in cabbage. We didn't know that in those days, but somehow she had that wisdom to know that these two things together is going to make you feel better and produce these anti-cancer compounds. That's incredible to
Eh,
me.
Yeah, that's a really amazing thing because I've noticed that too. I go to Guatemala for medical trips, and I was there, and we were in this remote village. They don't have TVs, radios, nothing, and
Hmm.
they're just there. And then this guy comes in, and what he was describing was diabetic neuropathy,
Hmm.
diabetes, peeing all the time, being thirsty, and his eyes get blurry. And he says, "It's the weirdest thing." He's telling me in Spanish. My wife brings me this tea. She puts 3 leaves in there and boils it, and when I drink it, my feet don't hurt as bad. My vision, I'm not peeing as much, and I'm not. I feel great. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like, find that out.
Yeah.
And it turns out it was guava leaves. It was a guava. He came back
Yeah.
an hour later. He goes, "It's guava." He goes, "She put the
Yeah.
guava leaf from the fruit, not the fruit, but just the leaf."
Yeah.
And so I was messing around, seeing the in clinics, trying with some people and seeing their sugars come down when we were following
Yeah.
it over the next couple hours. Go, wow, that is pretty wild. They
It's
just knew it.
amazing.
They just
I,
know
I
it.
actually have 4 or 5 different guava trees, and I make guava because that's an ancient thing from India as well, that we use guava leaves. Another thing from, I think maybe even Central America, is epazote. It's incredible for the gut. I just remember going on one of those trips and having a nightmare of a gut issue. And the person, my friend's mother said, "I'm going to make you a tea." She makes this tea, and the next morning I'm fine. I
Yeah.
said, "What the heck is this? This is great. This is wonderful." And she says, "Episodic." And I started growing it here in California, and I love it. This is one of the herbs that I tell all my clients, please grow it. It's so easy to grow this. All you need are 3 to 4 leaves. When you're cooking your black beans, add the episote in, and it'll make a difference with the flatulence that you experience with beans. It's incredible.
Wow, so that's good. Those are all great. Those are great
Yeah,
tips. Do you have
yeah,
any other that you just say, look, okay, I think we can agree. Okay, let's cut out processed food, all the garbage like fake foods and
yeah.
dyes and emulsifiers and all that kind of stuff. But if you come to if someone comes in who's really struggling, are there certain things you go, most people will benefit from adding this to their diet?
Well, I would say if I could, the next hour, if I could say, I would say fiber, fiber, fiber. because
Yeah.
this is the most, and fiber really meaning, when people think of fiber, we think of one thing. It keeps you regular. But fiber is way more than that. And you need different kinds of fiber. You need soluble fiber, as the name suggests, something that dissolves in water and makes that kind of viscous gel-like thing. And incredible in so many different ways. Definitely for your cholesterol. It's great for your gut microbiome, just brilliant things. Insoluble fiber is the fiber that you get like in the stalk of the plant, hemicellulose, lignans, and things like that. And they're the ones that kind of bulk up your stool and keep you regular. But you need both. And most plants have both soluble and insoluble. And getting a different kinds of fiber really helps. So let's say beta glucan comes from oats. Oat has become almost like a dangerous thing today. Don't eat oats, but it can't be that for everybody. Maybe some people have like a
Sure.
glycemic response to oats, but oat bran, the bran of it has beta glucans, and beta glucan is a soluble fiber that does so many different things for us. And the biggest thing it does, Brian, is when you eat things, fibrous foods like that, and we don't get to digest it. We don't have the capacity to digest it. It goes into your colon, and the trillions of bacteria there feast on it, and they produce something called short chain fatty acids. And these are very healthy compounds that really help us in so many different ways. Immune system, 70% of your immune system is in the gut, as you really know. And um, it becomes like a training ground. Your microbes are training your immune system to have the right response. This is a friend, this is a foe, don't do anything here. And all of that comes from feeding the microbiome what it wants so it can do a job for us. And not just the short chain fatty acids, but also vitamins, neurotransmitters, just all of that is thanks to our microbes. So feeding them that and prebiotic fibers, fermented foods, herbs and spices. Every culture has herbs and spices. So in my book, for example, I don't stick to this is the only kind of cuisine that's going to help you. I think cultural diversity, we are a melting pot in this country. We have every kind of cuisine available to us. Go find things that you like. I mean, I love Mexican food, being in California, and I find all of the little secrets. What did your grandmother cook? Did she have this? And if she cooked the meat, what did she add into it? Just become very curious about other cultures, and they will share things that are so incredible that we can use as pearls of wisdom, that's passed on from other cultures and generations. So,
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just seeing these in different cultures, and if you go to a different place, you can get sick from the food because you're not used to digesting. I was
right.
seeing somewhere in Japan, I think they have certain gut microbiome that will
Yeah,
digest
yeah.
certain, right? They'll digest things
Seaweed.
that we can't, seaweed, we can't
Yeah,
digest it,
yeah.
but they can.
They have very specific microbes that are even tofu, they have tofu digesting microbes. And we can actually nourish and grow keystone species. I think everyone's heard of acromantia. It's gotten a lot of press for
Mm.
especially for blood sugar balance and weight loss. And if you have even a little bit of acromantia, there's no need to take a supplement. I mean, you can't really you could actually grow it, by having foods that are rich in polyphenolic compounds like pomegranate, green tea, dark chocolate, things like that can really up your Akkermansia, population. So food is the biggest needle mover when it comes to the microbiome health. Even 24 hours is all it takes to change your microbial composition. So.
How about fasting and microbial
Oh,
diversity?
fantastic. That's the diversity increases. They really love that there's restricted eating. I haven't found anything that says the time restricted eating in the early hours versus late hours, if there's a difference. But this is just a hypothesis, but knowing that the microbiome has its own circadian rhythm, I'm thinking that I'm guessing that they prefer the early eating hours as well. So, but restricted eating, time restricted eating does help the microbial populations.
Yeah, and there's so many other things that we do from a Western medicine standpoint. Antibiotics. You see
Yeah,
people like anyone has a sniffle, they get antibiotics. They're tired, they get antibiotics, and I see this overuse of antibiotics, which destroy the gut microbiome, and
yeah,
also antacids. If someone has an upset stomach, they're
yeah,
put on a Nexium for 30
yeah.
years, and no one ever
I want to ask you
revisits them.
that, Brian. That is my biggest. I told you I have a podcast called Bad Medicine, and Dr. Canelo and I talk about that a lot because I see a lot of clients coming to me, and I ask them, how long have you been on this PPI? Oh, I don't know, many, many years. And have you talked to your doctor about just maybe weaning off of it, or at least seeing, do you really need it? But that conversation hasn't happened. So a lot of practices, they're just put on something and we never look beyond that. And I don't blame the doctors. I think it's a system.
I
If
do.
you
I
have
do.
50, but
No, I do. Because
eh,
sometimes you look and it's like, why are you on all these? I mean, I see seniors that come in, I look at their med
yeah,
list and go, oh my gosh, you're on like, why are you in this medicine is for the side effect of this medicine? You don't even need this one anymore. And then they give you another one because this one, and you think and go, because everyone's afraid in Western medicine to take a medicine away because we think
yeah.
that's saving everyone's life. So if you don't give someone antibiotics, you're afraid because if they get an infection, they're going to come back and say, my doctor wouldn't even give me antibiotics.
Yeah. No, but what I mean is that they're so busy. They have maybe 15 minutes with a patient. I can see how some of these things just go unnoticed because it just becomes my patient has a problem today. Let me focus on that. Everything else is to I
Yeah.
want to believe that, because I don't think it's negligence. Sometimes it's just the way it is.
Well, and I get it because I was in the system for 20 years of my career and
Yeah.
I saw it. It was just you want to fix the acute problem, you don't have time
Yeah.
to fix all this other stuff, but they don't talk to you about diet, nutrition, stress, sleep.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about nutrition for treating some of
Yeah.
these conditions, you think, wow, we're seeing dementia improving,
Yeah.
Parkinson's getting better, all these things. If we look at lifestyle and stress and human
Yeah.
engagement, mental using your brain, playing
Mhm.
games, having fun, going and
Yeah.
enjoying
Having
life a
fun.
little bit.
Yeah, just having fun. You said that, you said it. I mean, you put on this earth to have fun too, let's not forget that. And I think we need in this health system, we need a team. And that's where people like coaches, nutritionists, all of them have a part to play. And I think it's teamwork, and that's where I think our biggest problem is. Internists don't talk to specialists, specialists don't report back to family medicine doctors. I mean, there's just such a mess there, and so in that, the poor patient loses because everyone's prescribing their own medicine and the patient doesn't know who to ask for guidance. I mean, I
Mhm.
just had a client recently who had her nephew, I think, died of cardiac arrest, very young, 20, 22, and she was like, she immediately thought, oh, there's a genetic component. Went and got her EKG, all of that done, and then she came to me for weight loss. And one of the first questions on the intake that I asked her is like, do you have a good lipid profile? What do your lipids look like? And she said, oh, I was never tested for that. For me, that's bad medicine.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
No,
I
not
mean,
checking that, not checking fasting. And they go, you're not diabetic, you're not pre-diabetic because you look fine.
yeah.
But you can't tell because some people,
So
especially of Asian and Indian descent, they get
exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But this woman's Caucasian, and I said, go to your doctor, see if he can order an ApoB, an LP little a. Let's see what your small LDL looks like, all of that, and then come back and let's have a conversation. Her LP little a was like 260. Her ApoB was sky high. Forget about all the other things. Her triglycerides were really high. And then the doctor felt very embarrassed. And then we were able to squeeze in a request for a cardiologist. So I sent her to a cardiologist to get a good checkup. And that shouldn't be. There are certain things that need to be done as like protocol, I think.
But you're right. There's so much that we do in Western medicine. I see people have an upset stomach and then they're on the PPI and then they get osteoporosis. They have dysbiosis like crazy, and we're seeing a lot of bad gut microbiome. but it's hard because the doctor told them you can never come off this medicine or you're going to die, basically. And so they're
Yeah.
afraid to.
Yeah, and everything takes time, right? Even weaning off of PPI is not something you do drastically. It has to be done, with time, talking to the patient. How is he feeling? Is it, changing the dosage every day? And that requires an incredible amount of time and, consistency and it's just not available these days.
Yeah, and how are
Um,
you approaching if someone has like we know they have leaky gut, like their zonulin's super high, they got all their inflammatory markers are through the roof. Are you using supplements for that, like L-glutamine, things like that, or just doing it through a nutritional approach?
Well, for most people, I say let's not focus on the bad guys. Let's focus on increasing the good guys. I mean, how many pathogenic bacteria are you going to go after? It doesn't make sense to me, even from all of the studies that I've gone through. So I start really helping them with nourishing their microbiome. If there is a symptom, like let's say diarrhea, and everything else comes back okay. H. pylori, no problem. None of those that are
C. diff, all those guys, yeah.
yeah, all the bad guys are just ruled out by regular office visits, where they don't have to spend $400 for I won't name the test, but the test. And so if they can get it covered by insurance, then what I do is say, okay, let's start with something like glutamine and some Saccharomyces boulardii, to help them with the diarrhea. And once the system calms down a bit, we slowly start increasing. We do an elimination and the big part of the elimination is adding these foods back because not, and especially in young people, how long are they going to be without eating pizza or cheese or something like that? And that's just so part of the culture. So we added back to see how their body responds to it. If they have a reaction, if it's sensitivity, then if it's really bad, then I have them add back the gluten and go get a celiac, test done, for patients who have celiac disease. Other times it's the patient decides, I don't want to do this anymore. I feel so much better without the gluten or the dairy. That becomes their choice. I let them make the call
Mm.
but we really kind of increase all the micronutrients so they feel nourished.
Yeah,
So
and I've always thought of the gut microbiome as kind of like if you have a neighbor, a town, and the gangs take over and they run everything. So you got a few
yeah.
bad guys and all the good people are hiding. So once you get all the enough nice people, you don't have to get rid of each bad guy because the nice people are gonna take over again,
It's
right?
a great way to describe it. I think that's what it is. And it's also, I mean, functions. We want enough bacteria in there that are doing, there's something called functional redundancy. So your microbiome could be very different from mine. Maybe our phyla are about the same, the main phyla that you have and I have, but we could have different species doing different things for us. So it's not important to eat the same foods. It's as long as we are nourishing them and your body responds to it and it's increasing diversity. I think that is the bigger picture that I'm going after
Yeah, it's
rather
what works for
than,
you. It's
yeah,
not what works for the guy down the street or
yeah,
whoever the
yeah,
other leaders in the community are,
yeah.
right? Yeah. How about other things like apple cider vinegar, kimchi, sauerkraut, things? Are there
Oh,
certain things you go, yeah, these are great to add into anyone's diet that helps?
well, that's the thing. It's so bio-individual.
Hmm.
There are people who cannot handle fermented foods. They maybe they are at a place where they can have add fiber, but fermented foods are a no-no. So we go very slow. So I say, let's start with like half a teaspoon of sauerkraut. Let's
Hmm.
see how your body responds to it. Let's see what kind of and then if they start doing better, then we add other things, kombucha or fermented foods, or making very specific yogurts like Lactobacillus reuteri is
Hmm.
just such a well-studied strain. A lot of my clients will come to me and say, "Oh, I just got this really nice fancy yogurt," but it's very important to see what kind of microbes are in the yogurt. Just because it says probiotic cultures doesn't mean a thing. You're just spending big bucks on a product
Yeah.
that's not going to do a darn thing for you.
Yeah, you're better off
Instead,
just making it yourself and doing it so
yeah,
you know what's there and you can ferment it as long as you want and not, just because they have turnover, they're trying to get the product out. So some of them I think they ferment for
They
like four
die.
to
And
six hours, and they
yeah.
just ship it out in the heat, to
Yeah,
kill it
and
all
then
off.
and certain bacteria like Lactobacillus reuteri requires a certain temperature. But there are some good yogurts, like for example, if someone's struggling with constipation, BB Lactis 12 is a good strain, and certain. Can I mention a brand name?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Nancy's Yogurts has it. I think it's one of the few yogurts that has BB lactis 12. So that's great for people, some of my clients. So maybe have a little bit of that yogurt with psyllium husk on it and some chia seeds and some sunflower seeds. And that's a great start for your day with fiber. You having soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, protein from the Greek yogurt, so and fat. So you're covered, macros and micros.
Yeah, and there is some talk too. That was one thing. At least it was theoretical. I think there was a couple of docs talking about that. The possibility of if you starve Akkermansia for too long, for it not giving it carbohydrate, not giving it sugar, that it can start eating the mucus layer to
Oh
survive, and then
yeah,
you get
yeah,
leaky gut and you get all these other problems
yeah,
by being too restrictive.
yeah. It is a mucus-loving bacteria. So this is where the Goldilocks principle is very important. So you don't want too much of Akkermansia or too little. But all the tests that I've seen so far, Brian, I've never seen anyone having too much Akkermansia. Maybe a few people, but mostly it's very low or not detected.
Yeah, and
So
the other concerning one is a lot of people are having low bifidobacterium, which has a
yeah.
huge role in immune function.
Yeah. Bifidobacterium is low. A lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of the unhealthy metabolites from proteolytic fermentation. That's huge. And keystone species are all lacking bifidobacterium. And one thing that we look for, especially in IBD and cases like that, is proteobacteria. You don't want too much of it. Yeah. So a gut test really kind of gives you a starting point. You know, if not anything, it's curiosity. Who's in there?
Yeah.
I mean, we are not at a place where we can say it's diagnostic, of course, but if we get an idea whether we have, let's say, for example, the Hadza tribe, the hunter and gatherer tribe, they have 1,500 species. We have like a paltry 270, 280, and this is, I'm talking a healthy American. The kind of people who come to me, I don't think I've ever seen anything more than 140. And the lowest I've seen is 22.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah, it's scary. It is.
imagine?
It
It
is
is.
scary, and people don't
Yeah.
realize it. And that's why we were talking beforehand. I had a doctor chastise me for talking about the microbiome, saying there's no data. I'm like, there's a ton of data on this
Yeah.
stuff, and diseases that are specific for certain microbiomes. And so,
Yeah.
I think this whole thing of microbial diversity is really, I mean, that is the thing that I keep seeing coming back and back. And that sounds like doing your research. Um, from Flourish from Within. Tell me about your book so we don't forget
Yeah.
about that.
Well, yeah, my book came with my passion. I really had gut issues along many moons ago, and this is, I'm talking, Brian, at a time when we didn't have internet, or we didn't have chat GPT and things like that. So I had to go to UCSD, research, and that's where I fell in love with the microbiome. And we're talking human microbiome project, just the early infancy. From there to now, the immense knowledge and researchers, thank you, researchers. It's like amazing how much information we have in every aspect of our life and how it's connected to the microbiome, the gut brain, the gut immune system, the gut cardiovascular issues, gut insulin. I mean, just you name it, there's a connection, and it would be prudent to take notice and at least say, what do these guys want? These are our forever guests. They're not going anywhere. They have a
They're going to
place.
outlive us.
Yeah.
When we're gone, they're still going to be doing their thing.
They're going to be doing their thing. And this is an heirloom that we pass on to future generations.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, and if you think about your children and your grandchildren, this is the best thing that you can pass on. The more diversity, the more species, keeps them healthier. So that became my mission. I've 2 out of 3 Americans do not know what the microbiome is, and that was my mission to change that. So Flourish from Within, the first part of the book is all about the microbiome in very simple layperson's terms, nothing too scientific, but just enough. But it's based on evidence-based and research-based. I don't romanticize the microbiome. We tend to do that sometimes in certain circles because we love it so much. But then the second section is about a diet that I propose. It does not really talk about macros. It just talks about how do you feed your microbiome. You follow the diet that you want, but this is how you feed your microbiome. And finally, about 50 recipes to support.
Awesome. Do you have any
Mhm.
favorite recipes that for the
I
microbiome that you say, oh yeah, this is like for my go-to?
Well, it's not about a recipe, but it's more my approach to working with clients because we all make goals, but we don't really kind of go after the goal. And that's the same. Let's say your goal today is to add 40 grams of fiber every day. I mean, you may stick to it for a few days, but then life gets in the way, you have a lot of patience. That's forgotten. So my job is convenience leads to consistency. So I
Mhm.
format a recipe. This, and this, add all of this. It's like a formula, so you don't forget. So if I tell you take beta glucan every day, you may remember it for a couple of days and then you forget about it because that's not habit yet. It's not a procedural thing like brushing your teeth. So until it becomes procedural, I think formatted approaches, really building a system around how you eat is very important. If not, you're just going to, it's not going to stick. There's no way.
And for people who aren't going to change their diet, they go, look, this is what I eat. Are there any like supplements that you like as far as to get a good fiber mix for them? A capsule or a powder or something like that. I don't mind you saying the brand name because there's a couple that I use.
Well, I think anything could be a food supplement, like psyllium husk is a supplement that I think everyone, especially with someone with an insulin response or who's insulin resistant, should add some soluble fiber or high cholesterol. I would definitely say add something like a fiber pill or adding psyllium husk powder. That would be great. Um, I personally don't. I'm not a big fan of believe it or not, I'm not a big fan of too many probiotics because they're all transient in nature. As long as you're taking it,
Yeah.
it's fine. When you stop, the efficacy goes away. So it's better to feed your microbiome, give them
With a
what they
good
really need.
polyphenol,
Polyphenol
good substance to grow. Yeah.
substance. Yeah, just it all comes from our food, why not do it? But if you really must, the one that I would say has always worked is Saccharomyces boulardii. So if you're traveling
Mhm.
anywhere, pack it because it really does help with, travel related diarrhea. A simple, and I think the strain matters a lot. So look for strains, it's very important. We always get kind of attracted by the shiny new object, the marketing, all of that. But the more important thing is what strain is in the bacteria that plays anything with a bifidobacterium, lactobacillus reuteri. If you're concerned about your vaginal health as a listener, then lactobacillus crepitus, things like that really kind of bring balance to vaginal health. Sperm has its own microbiome. Sperm health, is connected to gut health. So you really, there's no escaping this. You have to start with the gut, but it has incredible, benefits for every aspect of your flourishing. And that's the
Yeah, I
reason
think
I
that's
call
so
it
important. I
flourish.
think these are the things that we start out talking about these things. So the way I'm looking at it too is okay, you want your garden to grow nice. So you're planting all these nice seeds, but then you're putting chemicals and poisons on top of them. They're not going to grow right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things like, okay, first of all, we got to take away what screwed up our gut microbiome in the first place, right? Take those things out if it's excessive alcohol or processed foods or food dyes. And the other thing we didn't really touch on, I would love to have your
We
take
can
on.
uh, we can do a list of things that really, and I think top of the list is ultra processed food.
Yes, I'd
That's
agree.
like you and I going into Home Depot and eating something there. I mean, that's pretty much what they're looking
Yeah,
at. Like,
exactly right.
what the heck? I don't know what this is. So ultra processed foods, and by that I mean your sugar and your flour and processed foods and meats and things like that that they don't recognize. as food.
Hmm.
Then emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners. I'm just actually just naming the things that have been studied as salt. High salt has been shown to really affect the microbial composition. At, as far as drugs, PPIs, antibiotics, all of them really have an pretty nasty effect on the microbial composition. Hyperhygiene, I mean, if you're washing your hands 100 times with an antimicrobial soap, stop it. You're not in some remote part of Africa, dealing with, uh, you know, diseases and infections. We live in the first world. So I
And
think
even being in
you're
the
right.
dirt and working in the garden
Yeah.
helps with your gut microbiome.
Garden is great. I mean, that's one of the reasons I garden as much as I do. Forest bathing, being in nature, walking on the beach, anything like exercise. Guys, if I forgot that, athletes, studies have shown that athletes have a much higher diversity, microbial diversity compared to those of us who are couch potatoes. So
Hmm.
that one thing should get you walking today. Just walk, get yourself out there. Pick something that you like. It doesn't care. If you like dancing, go dance. If you want to do strength training, that really does help. And postmenopausal women, strength training is absolutely, it's so important,
Critical, critical.
critical, and it does help with the microbiome as well. So there's an added benefit there. So yeah. And sleep, I would say sleep is really important. And one thing, I mean, I think, did you see, Brian, there was this, I think this 110-year-old, the oldest woman who just recently passed. They checked her microbiome and it was that of an infant because
Wow.
and they kind of attributed her longevity to her microbial health because as we age our microbial composition changes because what happens when we get older, we are probably in assisted living or we're not eating a variety of foods, we probably have dentures, we don't have the texturous foods, so all of that can decrease the microbial composition. So this is amazing that this woman had the composition of an infant. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and now, unfortunately, now the infants are being born with the microbiome of an old person, right? They're missing all this diversity already, and then you say,
Yeah,
"Oh, what happens when we get older? What's going to happen if we don't fix
yeah.
this problem?" So, what you're doing is such important work. That's why I
Mhm.
was excited to have you on because we really have to look at the gut microbiome. There's so much science out there. Sabine Hazen is a doctor who does a lot with the gut microbiome, and some of her research is mind blowing about
Amazing. Yeah.
personality changes and all these things with depression and anxiety has a certain gut microbiome. And so I think we're at, and as you say, it's like we're just taking a shot in the dark. We can look at the microbiome and but we're looking for patterns, maybe, patterns of why we're not digesting right, why
Yeah.
we're afraid of certain foods. And really a lot of stuff we call food is not food, and that's what we have to get back to is like if we just all agree to get rid of all the processed, terrible stuff, and then fall to whatever spectrum works for you, where you feel the best.
Exactly. I think that that's so sensible. I mean, because food is so social, food is cultural. Pick the things that really make your palate happy, and I by that I mean healthy, unprocessed foods. Because this is new to us. Even in the 1970s, we didn't have obesity is the biggest chronic disease that we have, regardless of how you get to losing your weight, that doesn't matter. Low fat, high protein, low carb, whatever. Lose the weight, but don't lose your diversity at the same time. Maintain
Yeah.
your microbial diversity so you're optimally well. And I think that's everybody's birthright.
Yeah, smile, have fun. Don't take life
Yeah.
so serious. All these things that we're talking about, these are real critical. It sounds so woo-woo, but it's real. It's like what we have
Yeah.
to do. And I'll have to ask you, Anu, what's life's best medicine for you? Like, where do you go when life's hard? What motivates you? What keeps you going? What would you tell people matters in life?
I think for me, it's joy. I think being at peace, the other day someone asked me, where is home for you? I said, home is where peace is.
Mm.
If you're at peace and you're joyful, that's life's best medicine, I think, because then you're not concerned about what the other guy said, someone's shitting on you. I mean, you don't care about anything, you
Yeah.
just because you're at peace and you love everybody because they're all kind of representations of this universe. I truly believe that. That's yeah.
Yeah, I think there's way more truth in that to that than we expect, because my dad is 85 years old and he smoked 2 packs for 50 years, drank, he did everything, but he never let anything bug him. He goes, no problem, I'm not worrying about it. Nothing ever bothered him. I'm like, how in the heck are you still alive, man? He goes, you know what? Just take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
Appreciate what you got, enjoy life. You could get away with a lot of other stuff, but obviously I'm not recommending that because you could live 80 years longer or whatever.
Yeah,
But
that's more anecdotal. But the
yeah,
thing
it's
is,
anecdotal for sure. Absolutely.
but
And
for
I tell
me,
them that.
like
I go, you're just lucky or something. But there is something to that when you
it
don't get
is.
worried about every little thing you're doing, and
Yeah.
every, you can worry
I'll
about
tell you, Brian,
too
my
much.
mom's 93 and she is a true representation of being present to life.
Mm.
I mean, she's never been concerned about anything, or, she welcomes everyone. She loves everybody. Like this month, I have over 35 people coming in to see her. Everyone loves her, and that's
Yeah.
because she's positive. She doesn't complain about, oh, I have this pain, I have that pain.
Yeah.
Just her life is just always like, I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I
And
think
that's the thing, is
gratitude.
being grateful and appreciate it and counting your blessings and saying, okay, I may not have everything, but so many people right now are listening are worried about, my neighbor has a bigger house, they have a nicer car, they have nicer kids, whatever. And don't worry about it. Enjoy your life a little bit. Cut out the processed food, enjoy life. Go for a walk on the beach, listen to the birds, whatever makes you happy. If you like collecting rocks, I don't care. So thank you so much. It's so great to have you. And
You're
just to remind
welcome.
people, when your book, when it's coming out and how they can get it, and we'll put all the links in the show notes also.
Okay. My website is ninearmsofwellness.com, and my book will be sold where all books are sold, and also on my website. You can pre-order it now. And also my Instagram handle is at 9armsofwellness.
Awesome. Anu, thanks so much for joining
Thank
me.
you.
Such a
Thank you.
pleasure having you. It was a great discussion. I learned a lot from you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate that you're helping getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.